Welcome to the Black News Network, your source for news from a Black perspective. We're here to cut through the noise and bring you the unfiltered truth. No sugarcoating, no spin, just raw, honest reporting.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. This is War Smith here with the Black News Network, BNN 247, coming at you live with a really nice broadcast. We're going to talk about something that most of us don't pay attention to, and that's progging. And, you know, some people look at it as squatting, but I'm going to start out with progging, because progging is the underneath the carpet type thing where people don't pay attention to at all. And the matter of fact, they could be in your house right now and you would never know that you got other people living in your attic, in your basement, or in your crawl spaces. People have gotten so desperate with finding a place to live that they are willing to be quiet all day when you're home. And as moment you leave, they'll come out of the attic and go down to your refrigerator and start fixing them a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, or whatever the case may be. So today, our topic is going to be squatting and trespassing. In the big ATL, there were 15 people squatting in several properties, and the owners of the property really couldn't do anything about it, because when you're a squatter, or when you're trespassing, or not necessarily trespassing, when you're a progger or you squatting, your residence or domicile is where you live. If you happen to get a piece of mail there, then it's considered yours. You have to be evicted based on tenant standards. You cannot just be thrown up out of that house because you're squatting in there. They cannot, the owner of that property cannot walk in there and take you out to the street and tell you to get the hell out of his property. Because if he does, he's subject to lose that property if and only if you took it to court, because he's violated your civil rights. No owner now in the United States has the right to throw you out of a property, especially if you're in there when they show up. Now, there's other ways that things happen here. Now, trespassing is a big issue when it comes to squatting, because technically, if you're squatting, you're trespassing. But there are certain steps you have to take before you can move somebody off your property. So let's say you see somebody's standing on your property and you say, well, hey, I don't want you on my property. You need to get off. And that person decides not to move, then you have no legal right to remove that person from your land. Because if you do, you have placed yourself in a criminal situation where you'll be the one going to jail and you will be the one fined, because you've again violated that individual's civil rights. You cannot physically remove a person from your property. That is not your responsibility. You cannot take the law in your own hands. That's what it boils down to, because the law is the law is the law. Now, how do you get a trespasser off of your property? That is a secret that most people will not tell you, but here it is today on the BNN 247. We're live and inshore to tell you how to do it. First, when you have a trespasser on your property, you can ask them to leave. And if they leave, then the situation is over. But if you ask that trespasser to leave and that trespasser decides not to leave, then you have one course that you can take, and that is to call 911 or whatever it is in your neighborhood. Even if you have the right direct number, call that number too. Call that number and invite the sheriff out to your property, the police department out to your property and say, officer, I asked this individual to remove themselves from my property, and they decided not to move. So I wanted you here to hear me ask them to move. And that's what the officer is going to tell you. Well, you have to do it again, and you have to do it in my presence. And that time, if that individual don't decide to move, then I will assist you in removing that person from your property. But you can't do it alone. You have to have that officer there in order to remove that person from your property. And this not only applies to residential properties, this applies to commercial properties, stores, any type of situation, any type of thing where there's an owner and there's a person that you might consider trespassing or squatting or progging on your property. You have no right to physically remove that person from your property without going through the tenant requirements in that particular state. You know, nobody gives you the right to do that. So that's number one. Once you get the police to have that individual moved, then the police will move that person off. And if they come back on your property, all you have to do from that point on with that particular individual is call the police or call the sheriff department and tell them that this very same person is trespassing on your property. And you don't even have to go out there. Your police will go out and pick that person up and lock them up for trespassing. Now, you might think trespassing is a criminal offense. No, it's just a misdemeanor. Trespassing is something that they will take you to court, slap you on the wrist, and tell you don't do it again and let you go. And if it's a repetitive type thing, then that's when the fines start, the incarceration starts, and the convictions start. So you cannot expect the police to be there to be your personal legal services. So they'll come out one or two times, but they're not going to keep coming out to your property to get people off your property. So how do you maintain it? You can't. You cannot. And if you're in a residential zone and you have several properties that you lease or rent out or day, what do they call them? Day B&Bs. That's what they call them, B&Bs. If you have the B&Bs and somebody decides that they want to sneak in your property and be there, and you finally come over to do some maintenance or something, and you find somebody there, you can't make them leave. You have to, again, call the police, and the police can't make them leave either. That's the difference between trespassing and squatting. If they're in your residential property, inside a physical building, an establishment, you cannot get them out of there, nor can the police get them out. What has to happen is you can ask them to leave, the police can ask them to leave, but if they decide not to leave, they don't have to leave. You have to take them to court, just like you would do an eviction notice on a tenant that didn't pay rent. Because any other way, that person can end up owning your property. If you tried any other method to get that individual out of that home, you will be the one getting punished. And it doesn't sound right, and it doesn't look right when it's your property and you go in there and try and get somebody out of it, and you can't do a damn thing about it. Because if you try to take that person out of that property, then you are going to get punished by the law because you violated that individual's rights. So squatting is a big, big business here in America. Now, there's a third thing that these squatters do, because the key is to get the deed of that property in the squatter's name. Now, don't think it cannot happen. It can. That squatter can get your deed transferred into their name, and you're done. You can't get that house back to save your damn life. And if you did get it back, you'd have to pay out your ass to get it. Now, let me explain a little bit further when it comes to these several topics we're talking about. We're talking about progging, which is somebody living in your basement, somebody living in your attic, somebody living in your crawl space and you don't know it. And they're using all your amenities when you go to work or something like that. They go down and cook them something to eat, use your bathroom, your toilet articles, might even be using your toothbrush and you won't even know it. So now you got trespassers, people that don't give a damn about you knowing that they're there. You walking around on their property and they saying you telling them to leave. You can get the police to help you get the trespasser off of your property. There's no the difference that there's a squatter, there's a progger, and there is a trespasser. Now the squatter is the one who you really can't touch. You can't touch them. You really can't touch a progger either. The only one you can get the law to help you with is the trespasser. Otherwise, you got to take it to court to get it done, to get the person out of your property under the eviction terms of that state. The best part about all of this, you have the right to do it as well. And you don't even have to live on the property. There's another thing that's called a notice of adverse possession. Notice of adverse possession. Let's say your neighbor house has been abandoned, the grass has grown up, nobody's lived in the house for years, and you think it's an eyesore to your neighborhood. So you want to know what the hell's going on with that property because you can't get in touch with the people who used to live there. So what you would do as a neighbor, any neighbor, not necessarily one next door. You can be living down the street. It doesn't matter. You can be somebody from Timbuktu to see that property that nobody's occupying and it's overgrown and out of control. Then you go down to that local courthouse and you say, well, the local tax assessment office, and you find out, are there any taxes owed on this property? And the tax assessor don't give a damn who you are. If you call and asking about paying taxes, they're going to tell you if there are taxes owed on this property. And after several years, I think it's 3 to 5 years of accumulated property taxes that you have not paid, then your property is getting scheduled to go up on auction on the courthouse steps. That is what they do once a month in every major city. They auction off properties that are delinquent in taxes and they have no legal owners contacting the city. And the city goes out of their way to try to find these people, but when they can't come through and pay taxes and start back to taking care of that property, they will sell that property to the highest bidder. A lot of developers and contractors, especially in these places where they're turning these communities over and making them back into the different type of communities they used to be. I ain't gonna call it what that word is that they used and they do in these communities. I don't want to even use that word in this conversation. But notice of adverse possession is when you go down to the courthouse, find out if there's any taxes owed on this property. You now pay those taxes. And normally the taxes ain't that much. A couple of $1,000 or $5,000 or less or something like that. Something really simple. You go pay the taxes, get a receipt. Then you go over to the county assessment office and tell them that you would like to file a notice of adverse possession on the property located at boom, 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 this address. They will give you a document and have you fill it out. And it will cost you in Texas, right here in San Antonio, it's $25. $25 will get you, it can get you a mansion. It can get you a small domiciled residence. It could get you something. It has to be an inhabited property where somebody's living there and nobody's there. And it's an eyesore. you can go down and get that notice of adverse possession. And now that property becomes under your responsibility. All you do now is go over and hire a lawn care service. Go, hey, fix this lawn up for me. Bring in a couple of contractors, or you go in there yourself and do some rehabilitations on that property and get it up to city code. And now that you got that property up to city code, you have the right to lease that property out to an individual. Okay, so you've fixed that property up. You've got it looking really nice. The neighbors are happy. And all of a sudden, here comes the owner of that property. Hey, I appreciate what you did for my property, but I'm back now. I want my shit. Hell to the no. You ain't getting your shit, not without going to court. Because what happens now, since you filed that little $25 document, for that person to get that property back, they have to take you to court. And then when they take you to court, they have to reimburse you every single expense you spent to improve that property. So, for instance, you had a lawn care service doing it every week for $100 a week. So, $400 a month, uh, uh, and do that for the rest of the year or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you're doing $100 a week, you can say you're doing $1,500 a week to do lawn care. It doesn't matter. And they have no right to question what you say that you are paying to maintain this property. If you change the doorknob, then that doorknob has to be paid for by that owner that had technically abandoned that property. He has to pay you as the notice of adverse possession holder whatever expenses you've placed in that property. Now, just as this is something that white people do all the time. They'll take your shit just like that. They will colonize your neighborhood just like that. Many of us as Black people, we allow our properties to get delinquent on taxes, and they will take your shit. I'm just telling you, the city will. And if you allow somebody to get a notice of adverse possession on your property, then you're screwed. Because if you don't get it right away, then you will let that property go. I don't want that because I'm not going to pay this individual $25,000 for my stuff. It's mine. I'm not going to pay that much for it. And the court's going to tell you, well, until you pay that man that amount of money, then you cannot have that property back because you abandoned that property and he took it on as a responsibility. You are not capable of getting that property back. So you might as well walk away unless you got plenty of money to spend. And if you had plenty of money to spend, you probably would not have allowed the taxes to go unpaid. Now, that is something that you have to really consider every single time you decide to not pay your taxes or to not take care of your property that you own somewhere in another area, not where you really live. And while I'm talking about this, there's two words I really want to make sure you understand. We always talk about our residence. Now, though, if you look up the definition of the word residence, you will find that the residence is not where you live. The residence is a temporary establishment where you stopped at. So when basically what's happening when somebody say, well, what's your residence? They're basically saying you don't live there any damn way, so we just not going to keep it that way by asking you what is your residence. There are technical terms. The American language is so damn screwed. It's unbelievable. One word can mean several damn things. Like right now we got residence, which it doesn't mean where you live. The only place you live is a domicile. That is it. If somebody said, well, what's your residence? Well, I don't have a residence, but I do have a domicile, because that's exactly what it is. Where you live is your domicile. So you as an individual should know that this is where you need the correct people. When they ask you your residence, you tell them, no, I don't have a residence, but I have a domicile. You have to remember the key words. It's all in the verbiage in America. Certain words will get you locked up so damn fast. For instance, I'm just throwing out some key figures that you need to know as a Black person in America. You living in your house, somebody's breaking in your house, you take your shotgun and you fire it at that individual, and you just happen to hit that individual, and that individual happened to become unalived. When that individual become unalived, the police is going to get involved. So they're going to come out and find out who took this person to another life. So they're going to say, well, what happened here? And you as the homeowner is going to say, normally if you don't know the verbiage, this is what you'll say. Well, that individual tried to break in my house, officer, and I let him have it. I bust a cap in his ass. I killed him. I shot him. The words kill, the words shot are the words that will get you locked up. Sounds simple, right? But that officer will keep asking you the same damn questions until you say that you killed a man or that you shot a man in the leg. You say you shot him in the ass or whatever you want to say. If you say you shot him particularly in a particular place, then both of those are called premeditated. You will be arrested for having a premeditated intent to harm a human being, just because you said you killed a person, just because you said I tried to shoot him in the leg. Those are considered premeditated. But this is what you can say. You can say that you tried to stop a person from breaking in your home, and this is the results. You can say, I controlled the situation because I was protecting my family. You can also say, I had to neutralize that individual because he was in my house and he didn't belong there. So he was trespassing. This is inside of your property. The law is something that you really have to understand before you take it into your own hands, because you can easily wind up on the wrong side of the law. For instance, and I'm explaining all this because normally when a person breaks in your house or something like that, or squats in your property or progs in your property, you want to take that person's life, get them up out of there, get them on out. But it doesn't work that way. So what you have to do is know the law. Now, remember, never tell a police officer you shot or killed anybody. In another case, if you see somebody in your property and you say, well, I'm going to get my gun and I'm coming back, and your ass better be gone. So if you go get your gun and come back and you tell that officer you went to get your gun and you came back, again, that is premeditated. You have to know the law when you're going to use situations to your advantage, because if you don't know the law, they will get you and they will keep questioning you until you say what they want to hear so they can lock you up. Now, always remember the Miranda rights. Miranda rights says anything you say can and will be used against you. And if you allow yourself to speak more than normal to an officer, remember the saying in the Miranda Act, the Miranda Rights Act. If you say, whatever you say can be used against you. And when they say that, they say can and will. So don't say anything. You have the right to say, I don't answer questions, officer. I said, you say, you can say, I don't answer questions. Just that simple. But progging, living in your basement, living in the attic, living in the crawl space, squatting, taking over a property when there's no one around, and then the tenant, the owner comes and try to put you out. They can't. Um, I'm sorry, that is my brother. Keep calling me for some reason. Anyway, and the last one is notice of adverse possession. You have to know that you can go and get that property legally if it has the appearance of being abandoned. That's something you can do. Um, the trespasser on that property can claim ownership of that property. And this is what I say when you do that notice of adverse possession, you're claiming ownership. It's under a claim of rights that you have now. It allows a trespasser to gain legal title to your property. So don't think squatting is just a fly-by-night thing or just something for vagrants, just something for homeless people. People that are intelligent, very intelligent people are doing this to confiscate these properties. You have to be aware that the people that you're dealing with that are squatting in your property ain't no damn fool. They know the law, because if they didn't know the law, they would not be in your property. They get out when you told them to get out. But when they say, no, I'm not leaving, then they know something that you might not know. So I suggest you go and find out what is actually happening here and how, what rights do you have to get people out of your own property, basically like that. And it doesn't work on cars or stuff like that, or train cars or whatever the case may be. You cannot use that under these pretenses. It doesn't go that way. So how do you remove a trespasser or a squatter? Um, Again, you have to tell them to leave. And if they don't leave, you have to involve the law to get them to leave. And once the law gets involved, then you now got to go to court to get them to leave. And it may take you 6 months to a year to get a squatter out of your house. It's running rampant in Atlanta. When they said 15 squatters got 15 different properties in Atlanta, that's terrible. These people they know the game, and it's a game. Everything has a legal loophole that can be used to somebody's advantage. And what you have to do as a property owner or an individual concerned about squatters, proggers, or notice of adverse possessions is to stay on top of your properties and make sure nobody squats in your properties. That's what you have to do. Now they do what they call a deed of continence. Continence. That deed of continence is something that they will give that person squatting in your property. In other words, the deed, if you're not familiar with a deed, that's the legal title to the home. And they give them a deed of connivance. I can't get the word properly, but when they give them that deed, you're SOL right now, because you can't make them leave without that court siding with you, and it will be a judgment by the court. I'm absolutely sure that if you take a squatter to court, they're gonna want to go to a trial by jury. Trial by your jury, because they want to cost the city as much headache and as much money as they can before they leave that property. And if you want to trial by jury, it takes another 2 or 3 months to round up a jury. Squatters cannot be totally removed. Owner must serve eviction notice, just like you would do a tenant. That is the only way you can get a squatter out. Otherwise, you're violating that squatter's rights. Now, key things here. Progging is something that you find a lot of quiet solitude people do. They live in your quarters without you even knowing it. You know, some people think bigger the house, the better the house. You look at all these millionaires buying these big ass houses and they got 41 bathrooms and nobody use the rest of that house. That house is sitting over there with nobody in it, and you can rest assured people know that this is what's happening with these big mansions. You see a football player making $35 million a year, go buy him this big ass house, and he only used like probably 1/5 of it with him and his family. And the rest of the house just sits dormant. Even the little houses they have on the property sits dormant. People are squatting in these properties and ain't really a whole lot they can do about it. They're using the electricity, they're using the facilities, they're using all these things, and nobody can control it because we are in a greed society. And greed causes us to produce excess of everything that we don't need. Sometimes you see properties where people may pass away with no relative available to take on this property. And believe it or not, the generation that's going out now, the baby boomer generations, 80 to 90% of these baby boomers own properties and they don't have anybody to leave I ain't gonna say, I say 20% of this 80 to 90% have properties that they don't have anyone to leave their properties to. So once they die, then that property becomes on the steps of the courthouse to be sold to the highest bidder. But if you are smart, if you're in real estate, you should be able to go around and find, or you should be able to get a listing of delinquent taxes on properties, and go and find out if those people that are on the deed, if they are still alive. Because if they're not still alive, then all you'll have to do is pay the taxes and do the $25 document, of course, notice of adverse possession. And now you got a property and you don't have to worry about anyone protesting that property because it's yours now. And you can do whatever you need to do with that property. And I know an individual who recently, not even a month ago, acquired 5 acres of land because they did the research and found out that this person had died, the owner of those 5 acres. And so they went and did the notice of adverse possession and paid the taxes on those 5 acres. And now they own it. It's theirs. It's just that simple to own property in America. It's really simple if you follow certain steps. But when you start to know about this notice of adverse possession, which is something they will not tell you and they do not want you to know, just like on when you use a firearm and telling the police you kill somebody, those are things that they don't want you to know as Black people. So you have to really understand the importance of the information that you're receiving on broadcast like BNN 247. These segments of information are to get you out of the dormanted position that many of us may have fallen into, not knowing these little basic things. I looked at a story the other day about a Mr. Williams. He went to jail in Louisiana at 16, and he was 79 or 80 when he died. And he had been in prison since he was 16. And then he just died a year or two ago. In prison because he did not know what to say to the officers, and they coerced him into signing a confession, and they locked him up and threw away the key because that man, a 16-year-old, went to prison back in the 50s, and he spent over 60 years of his life in prison because he did not know the law. So when you don't take heed to these very simple processes that you can use to advance yourself in America, then you're going to be left behind. Because I'm here to tell you that, well, some things I learned as a corporate American worker. I've worked A to Z, top to bottom, side to side, and I know how these things work. You have to learn the secrets that they do not want you to know. In whatever profession you're in, there are secrets to what's happening there. For instance, you get a job at the same time your peer gets a job. He's white, you're black. Why would his paycheck be 10 to 20,000 more than yours when you both have equal credentials? You both have equal availability. You can perform basically at the same level. Why would his paycheck be more than yours? So it's important that you be smart enough to figure out what they're paying him, because if they're not paying you what you're paying him, then you're being discriminated against and you don't even know it. See, today it is subtle discrimination. These are the things that we just talked about, are things that they don't want you to know because you can take advantage of the system just like they have. So many things you don't know that are prevalent, running like wildfire here in America within their cultures. And we are study trying to learn. They're planning and operating for 2 or 3 generations down the road. We're planning and operating on what we're going to do this Saturday night. We're way behind the 8 ball, and these little tidbits of information will help you gain some traction if you put them to work for you. Because if you put them to work for you, it's going to benefit the things that can benefit your family and your lifestyle. And it's all about economics, my friend. It's all about economics. If you don't learn how these systems work, then you'll be left behind on things that you could have learned, things that you could have done to elevate your family to another level. Don't take it for granted. And don't think that you need to be the one to apologize and turn the other cheek every damn time something come down the pipe. We're done marching, y'all. Police kill a black man. We don't want no damn vigil. We want justice. And you're not going to get justice on a 2-tiered legal system. Now, Donald Trump's coming into office talking about he's going to give every policeman in the country of United States of America carte blanche. They have diplomatic immunity, basically. I forget what they call it, but they will not be prosecuted. You cannot take them to jail. You cannot hold them accountable for anything they do in their communities. That's what he said he's going to make a blanket law of. What does that mean? Open season to us. Because they're there to control us. The law is written to control black, us. The only people who have not been compensated for the contributions they've given to this country, our people. Now, we can sit back and act like they don't owe us nothing, but our country, the United States of America, was built on the backs of blacks. The economics of this country was built on the backs of blacks. That is the only way we have gained a foothold in this world as the U.S. of A. because of the work that we put in cotton, soybeans, sugar canes, slave plantations. We worked the hell out of those plantations and made people billionaires. And what do you think happened to the money that we made for those people when we were slaves? All of that those salaries that were not paid to thousands and thousands of black people who worked their asses to death and didn't get a penny for their work. But that plantation owner did. Billions of dollars. That money is now being used by people today. That same money that your ancestors broke their backs on elevates white people today. And then they go back and they kill the affirmative action plan. I can get into all this stuff that really upsets me about America. But, you know, it ain't going to change a thing because what's going to change it is that we start to educate ourselves on how they operate. And then we'll understand how America operates. If you're in a profession and you don't know how they're operating with all people, then you're going to be left behind. And I'll tell you why I say that. When I was in the Army for 21 years. When I first got in the Army, I had this mentality that I found later that all black people have, is that you are going to see my performance. You'll see how good I work, and you're going to compensate me because I'm a good damn employee. I'm a damn superstar. I work my ass off to get this stuff done for you. So you should notice that, and you should pay me for it. Hell to the no. That's the problem. We believe that we should be compensated for the work we do, and they don't do it. But see, a white person, they want to get paid before they do any damn thing. And so I used to work so damn hard, and I'd watch the white boy get promoted, not me. And I'm down there knee deep in grease and maintenance on the trucks and shit. So my boss told me, say, yeah, I went to him and said, hey, I'm working my ass off, but then I see them boys over there getting promoted. He said, yeah, you're right. He said, they're going to school while you down here fixing every damn thing that moves. So if you want to get promoted, you're going to have to get out of that grease and go to school. When he told me that was like an aha moment, because from that point on, I raised my hand and volunteered for every damn thing came down the pipe. Every training, every school, every opportunity, I was on it. I've been on some wild shit too, just by volunteering, and all of that stuff added up to me getting promoted quicker than many of them after that. But I had to be told, because my mentality was that somebody would recognize how hard I worked and they would compensate me. And later I found out that that's a mentality that a big percentage of Black people have. And it's the wrong idea when you're in white America or corporate America. They're not going to recognize you based on what you do. You have to make sure that you're being recognized for what you know. And if you don't put it on the table and demand it, you probably not going to get it. You know, I'd rather get fired for asking for a raise than not to ask for one at all and watch everybody else that came in after me move ahead of me. You can let me go, because when I came there, I was looking for a job. That's why you see many Blacks right now would rather not go to work in corporate America. They're doing things like smash and grab, squatting. They're taking the properties through different sources, and they are gaining momentum. They're doing it all over the country. They're smashing and grabbing. They got these big box stores closing doors because our people walk in those damn stores and walk out with hundreds of dollars of stuff. And they do it all day long. And they're organized. This is the organization of the millennials. These guys get together in 15, 45 packs, and they'll hit a store and tear that store apart and run up out that store with all kind of shit. Smash and grab. It's running and it's working. I've been here for about an hour now. So I would like to say thank you for listening to the Black News Network, the real voice of Black USA, broadcasting live on Wednesdays and Sundays. Come and see us sometime. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for watching the Black News Network, where we bring you the news from a Black perspective. From challenging politically correct narratives to uncovering the unfiltered truth, we're dedicated to keeping you informed and empowered.